September 5th, we're at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. They have Formula 1, NASCAR, and a PGA golf course in and around the racetrack. Right now we are on the bus and we're going to go around the track of the Indianapolis Motor Speedway.
In its third year, built early in 1909 as a testing facility for the thriving automobile industry. Many famous makes were from here, like Marmon, National, and Cole, with the best known ones coming a little later on with Stutz, maker of the famous Bearcat, then, right after World War I, with the Duesenberg brothers. There are 4 turns, each measuring exactly 1/4 of a mile from entrance to exit, so that the entire track is 2.5 miles around. We are riding on the very same 2.5 miles used by the drivers 100 years ago. During the fall of 1909, down went 3,200,000 paving bricks, which is why the track still carries the nickname, the Brickyard. And where are the bricks today? Well, about 85% of the way around, they're still there, buried under several layers of asphalt. If you think you may have spotted a golf course on either side of us, well, you have. It dates back to 1929. It's been revamped a couple of times since, most recently in 1993 by the world-famous Pete Dye, who used to live in Indianapolis. There are now 4 holes inside the track and 14 over on the right. Anton Holman Jr. of Terre Haute, and it has remained in the Holman George family for over 60 years. And there's never been any tax dollars used here. The track is privately owned. The current 500 cars have to stop several times during the race. They'll take on up to 22 gallons of fuel and change 4 wheels in less than 10 seconds. And they don't use gasoline. From 1965 until 2006, everyone used methanol. Starting in 2007, the 500 cars have run on ethanol. NASCAR, however, does use gasoline, but blended with 15% ethanol. 1961, when A.J. Foyt won his first 500, the greater part of the main straight was still of bricks and mortar. And imagine that prior to the late 1930s, the entire 2.5 miles looked like that, and it made for a pretty rough ride.
After our tour, we visited the Indianapolis 500 Hall of Fame. In the Hall of Fame, we found this piano. This piano was playing at the Olympics the very same year that my Aunt Benita was an archer at the Olympics. How cool is that?
Safer instead to lead them away slowly behind a passenger car. Take them around on one unscored lap and then release them to the starter. So, what we are seeing here is believed to be the very first mass rolling start of an automobile race anywhere in the world, and, quite possibly, the first ever use of a pace car. The race was won in a time of 6 hours and 42 minutes by Ray Haroon, driving a racing version of the Marmon passenger car. Because he had designed for it a single-seat streamlined body, thereby saving the weight of a riding mechanic, other teams protested during practice, claiming that without the second pair of eyes, it was a safety hazard. No problem. He installed on rods above the cowling what is believed to be the very first rear-view mirror ever used on an automobile. The winner's prize of $10,000 was promptly doubled for 1912, and it appeared that the chief benefactor this time was going to be Italian-born Ralph de Palma. Driving a huge German Mercedes, he would lead for 196 of the 200 laps, and the only 4 he failed to lead were the first 2 and the last 2. Ahead by more than 11 minutes when he broke down with less than 1 1/4 laps to go, he and his riding mechanic then got out and began to push the heavy car through turn 4 and down the main straight. By the time they arrived, to a huge ovation, to complete 199 laps, 23-year-old Joe Dawson had already claimed the $20,000 prize. In 1913, several European teams came over to challenge the Americans, and it was a French Peugeot which won in the hands of Monsieur Jules Gou. The track had been designed for speeds in the region of 85 miles an hour, but in 1914, Gou's flamboyant teammate Georges Boileau turned a lap at just a tick under 100 miles an hour. In 1917 and 18, there was no race because of America's involvement in the First World War. But when action returned in 1919, 7 cars qualified in excess of 100. In 1920, another famous name came to the fore when a streamlined Monroe Special built by the Chevrolet brothers won it all in the hands of Louis and Arthur's kid brother, Gaston Chevrolet. In 1923, with single-seaters now in vogue, Tommy Milton became the first driver to win the 500 for a second time. 2 years later, and almost 2 hours had been cut from the original running time when Peter DiPaolo of the Duesenberg team was home in 4 hours and 56 minutes to average over 101 miles an hour. In 1927, the Speedway changed hands. America's World War I flying ace, Captain Eddie Rickenbacker, had in fact been a 500 driver before he ever learned how to fly a plane. In 1916, he had led the early stages of the 500 in a Maxwell owned by Carl Fisher and Jim Allison. Now an established businessman himself, he came to Speedway, Indiana to see if Allison would care to sell his engineering company. No, he would not, but he and Fisher did want to sell the racetrack. So, for the next 18 years, Eddie Rickenbacker headed up the group which purchased it.
Right now we're in the Indianapolis Motor Speedway Hall of Fame in the center of the track. Right behind me is the 1997 winner of the Indianapolis 500. There are several races that go on here at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. The Indianapolis 500, and there's also Formula 1 racing on the same track. The Formula 1 goes through the infield. There's a special track, although it does join into part of the NASCAR track.